Hi everyone, this is Satyajit. So welcome to my channel Cloud Journey with Satyajit. In the last videos, we discussed about what is endpoint and what is gateway endpoint and what is the benefit of endpoint we discussed in the last videos. So today we are going to discuss about one use cases of endpoint. Okay, if you see my diagram, so I have two VPC. One is Day VPC and one is Prod VPC, and both are part of Mumbai region. So in my account, I have two buckets. One is a dev bucket and one is prod bucket. So I want to restrict that only the dev servers, like whatever the EC2 instances are there, that EC2 instance can access only to the dev buckets, but they cannot access to the prod buckets. It will say access denied. And simultaneously, the whatever the EC2 instance is in the prod, they will access only the prod buckets, not to the dev buckets. Okay, so how I can restrict it? Okay, so this is achieved can multiple ways. Okay, so we have IAM policy. So IAM policy we can, so generally we in my videos I give an S3 full access, but that is not the best practices. So we can create one custom policies and we can only whitelist the respective bucket. So I can create one policy and I'll give only S3 put, get, and or else list, or maybe S3 full access per particular dev bucket, and that policy I will attach to this EC2 instance as a role. Okay, I will attach it. Then once I log into the EC2 instance, once I do AWS S3 LS, it will show all the buckets, but it can only access to that particular bucket. Okay, so when he wants to access the prod bucket, it will show access denied. One thing can be achieved by the IAM policies. Another thing where we can achieve by the bucket policies. Okay, so in the bucket policy also we can add our details. Like in the bucket policy, we will attach a policy like to this bucket, who can access it, which role can access, or what is the source of IP can access. So we can attach that. Okay, so bucket policy has the highest preceding order. Let's say IAM provided S3 full access, okay, and bucket policy had limited access to only particular IP. Then the preceding order will become as a bucket policies. IAM policy will not work because full access is not going to work. So two ways we can achieve it. But in this session, we are going to discuss about how this can be achieved by the endpoint. Okay, so there is such called endpoint policies. Okay, while we created the endpoint, but by default it has full access. Okay, so if you see my screen, so there is a endpoint. Okay, as if you see the policies, it has full access. Okay, allow star and resource star, full access is there. If I want to edit policies, see the full access is there, and there is a custom policy we can. So this is currently full access, and if you do custom, so custom policy also I can apply it. Okay, so we can add our own policies and we can able to access that. Okay, so after adding the policies, if you see my architecture diagram, okay, so what will happen, I will create, so as both are two VPC, right? So endpoint is part of one VPC, gateway endpoint. When we discuss about interface endpoint, that can span across different VPCs or different region, but the VPC endpoint, the gateway endpoint, cannot span across VPC. It is part of the limited to that VPC, and gateway endpoint is limited to route table. Okay, we can manage all the details, routing, and which can access the endpoint, that can be maintained only via the route table. So that's the reason whenever we create an endpoint, we need to attach, sorry, whenever we are creating the gateway endpoint, we need to attach which route table it need to be attached, or we need to attach which route table, whether it is public route table or private route table, we need to attach. Okay, so as in this I have two VPCs, so we need to create two endpoint. Okay, so one endpoint in the dev side and one endpoint in the prod side. So in the dev endpoint policy, we can only whitelist only the dev bucket. Okay, so that once you connected to the dev EC2 instance, from there you can only access to the dev bucket, and in the prod you can only whitelist the, in endpoint policy you can only whitelist the prod bucket. Okay, so then you can able to access only to the prod bucket, not to the dev bucket. So this is simpler, and also extra add-on policy we can secure our infrastructure. So I will show my current environment where I created the if you see there are two buckets. So I have created one Satyajit endpoint prod bucket and Satyajit endpoint test bucket. Just treat this is as a dev environment, dev bucket, and this is a prod bucket. Both are in part of Mumbai region. And if you see the VPC, so I have created two VPCs. One is VPC A, one is VPC B. But currently I did not create any endpoint policy. I would just want to show how if there is no endpoint policy, so it can able to access everything. Okay. So if I the EC2 instance, in the EC2 instance, I have two EC2 instance currently running. So one is both are in part of VPC A, and the endpoint I have created in VPC A, and this endpoint doesn't have any policy. It is all full access policies. Okay, so now I can able to access all the buckets because I don't have any restrictions. Okay, so now let me log in. I already logged into the private EC2 instance because it is 10.02.249. So I already shown in the earlier videos how to access. So you can directly connect to the jump server, and from that jump server, you can connect to the private EC2 instance. So if I exit from there, this is my local machine. So this is my public EC2 server. Okay, from there I can connect to the private EC2 server. So from here, if you see I will typing google.com, it is not going to work because there is no internet, there is no NAT gateway. Okay, so that's the reason endpoint is created. We have created endpoint so that we can able to access the S3 bucket. Whenever I do AWS S3 LS, it is able to list both the bucket, both the prod and test bucket. Okay, it can able to list, and I can able to list object also. So how to do that? AWS S3 LS and the bucket name. Once you put the bucket name, it will list how many objects are there, and you can upload the objects also. Let me create one empty file, let's say d.txt, and you can upload AWS S3 CP and the file name and the bucket details. Okay, if you do the prod, now it will going to upload. Okay, and you can able to verify d.txt will be uploaded. Okay, so you can able to put the details into the prod bucket. Same thing you can do to the test bucket as well. Okay, so if you prod and then you can type it test, so you can able to list also. And if you want to put the object, so just replace the prod with test. Okay, so now I can upload it. So if you do AWS S3 LS, it is going to list the object. Okay, d.txt is uploaded, and when it is uploaded and what time it is uploaded. So now there is no restrictions. Okay, so in the next videos we are going to discuss about how to create endpoint policies and how to attach it so that we can able to restrict it. Okay, so only the dev servers, they can connect to the dev buckets, and on the prod server they're only able to the prod buckets. Okay, so it will be more secure in your infrastructure, because maybe the scenario is the person, the development or developers, they have access to the dev environment, so they cannot play in the prod, they cannot put all the details or all the things by mistake to the prod object or the prod bucket, because if they do so, it will throw the error. If there is no restrictions, there might be a mismatch. They by mistake, they instead of putting into the dev buckets, they may be given the ARN of that prod bucket. The data will go and upload into the prod bucket, so which is not secure, and which is not the best practices. So you can even more secure into the infrastructure. Okay, so next videos we are going to discuss about how to create endpoint policies and how to attach it, and we can view that. Okay, thank you for watching my videos. Thank you.